if I start, who notices if I say I want to start speaking? Break a leg. Okay, let's start. Hi everyone, I'm just going to gently ask you to take your seats, and whilst you're doing that, can I ask for a really big round of applause for the Peak District Sax Quartet? I dream I could play the sax like that, but I can't really, so never mind. So, Congress. Is everyone settled? You're just getting yourself there, so I need you to come to order. Particularly the UCU delegation, who are right in front of my eyes. Congress. I have great pleasure in opening this, the TUC's 150th Congress, and I warmly welcome all of you to Manchester Central. The first formal item of business is to ask Congress to approve the tellers and scrutineers as set out on page 10 of the General Purposes Committee booklet. Is that agreed? If any teller has not yet met Matilda Quinney of the TUC staff, would you please come to the teller's table located on the floor to my left it says, thank you. If there's an emergency, you'll receive instructions on what to do either from me or over the tannoy. And if any delegate requires first aid, requests should be made in the first instance to any member of the Manchester Central staff. Congress. I'd now like to welcome sororal and fraternal delegates and visitors to Congress who are seated at the front of the hall over here. Colleagues, we're always pleased to welcome guests from other trade union movements around the world to Congress, and in this, our very special 150th Congress, we've got some of our closest friends with us. So I hope you'll welcome them as I ask them to stand in turn. We're honoured to have Brother Rikio Kozu, the president of the Japanese Trade Union Confederation Rengo, and his international officer Toshiro Motobayashi from the Asia-Pacific region. From Africa, we have Mamadou Diallo, the Deputy General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation. Ibrahim Abdul Kadir from the Nigerian Labour Congress. And apologies and warm greetings from Kusatu, whose own Congress is the week after ours. From the Americas, we're delighted to have Antonia Lisboa from the CUT in Brazil, and Damon Silvers of the AFL-CIO. Both of them are heavily involved in resisting their respective right-wing authoritarian presidents, and we express our solidarity with their struggles, and in particular, the campaign to free former President Lula from jail so that he can contest and win the election later this year. And Damon, good luck to those candidates standing on the side of workers in the midterms too. Really important for all of us. So later this afternoon, we'll also be hearing from the new president of the CUT in Colombia, Luis Pedraza. From Europe, we greet Rudy Delieu, the president of both the Belgian trade union movement and the TUC, along with the ETUC Confederal Secretary Esther Lynch. And at a global level, we have the ITUC Deputy General Secretary Mamadou Diallo, as well as Sergejus. I'm trying on my pronunciations, bear with me. We'll be joined later by our friends from the Irish Congress, the Russian FNPR, the DGB in Germany, and the LO in Sweden, where they are fighting to maintain a socialist government led by a former trade unionist in the general election today. And we've apologies from our Australian sisters and brothers who are campaigning to get elections as soon as possible to get another former trade union leader elected as their Prime Minister. There'll be a number of foreign visitors here this week. They're all most welcome. This year's sororial delegate from the Trades Council's conference is Gemma Offland. Gemma, you're sitting with the Unison delegation, I think, I hope. If you are, we say hello. During the course of this week, Congress, I'll be joined on the platform by the Vice President, Mary Bausted, and other members of the General Council, including those with lead responsibilities for the relevant sections of the General Council report. Colleagues, we now come to the obituary section of the report, which is on page 84, when we remember our trade union colleagues who have died in the past year. You can read more about the contribution many of these colleagues made to the trade union movement in the General Council report, and there are large print and braille versions of the report for those who have requested them. In asking you to remember all our former colleagues, I ask you also to remember other trade union colleagues who have died this year. I'm sure our thoughts are also with all those who have suffered loss through war, acts of terrorism, natural disasters over the past year. Congress, at this time, we usually recommit ourselves to world peace and justice. There has never been a more important time for unions to stand up for working people, for peace, and for justice all over the globe. Can all those who are able please stand for a few minutes quiet reflection? Thank you, Congress. I now call upon Linda McCulloch, the Chair of the General Purposes Committee, to report to us on the progress of business and other Congress arrangements. Linda.
Good afternoon, Congress. The General Purpose Committee approved 15 composite motions. Composite motions 1 to 15 are included in section 3 of the GPC report and composite motions booklet that you have all received. This morning, the GPC received notice from all 3 unions included in composite 15 that this composite has been withdrawn. On behalf of the GPC, I would like to thank all those unions who have cooperated and worked together to reach agreement on composite motions. Congress, the General Council has agreed 2 statements on Brexit and on collective bargaining. These are included in the GPC report. Congress, I can also report that the General Purpose Committee has approved 4 emergency motions. Composite Emergency Motion 1 on public sector pay will be moved by PCS, seconded by the POA and supported by the FBU. Emergency Motion 2 on Jesus Santrich will be moved by Unison and seconded by ASLEF. Emergency Motion 3 on defending journalism in the public interest will be moved by the NUJ. Emergency Motion 4 on cuts to the UNWRA and the nation-state law will be moved by ASLEF and seconded by Unite. The President will advise when it's hoped to take these emergency motions. Congress, can I remind you that only materials approved by the GPC may be distributed within the hall and venue, and can I also remind delegates that the mover of each motion may speak for 5 minutes and other speakers for up to 3 minutes. Thank you for your cooperation, and I will report to you on progress of business and other GPC decisions when necessary throughout Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Congress, I now invite you to formally receive the GPC report. Is that agreed? Thank you. As Linda reported, composite motion 15 has been withdrawn. Linda also reported the General Council has agreed a statement on Brexit, which will be taken on Monday afternoon and will be moved by Steve Turner, the General Council lead on Europe. The General Council statement on collective bargaining will be formally moved by the General Secretary as part of her address to Congress on Monday morning. The GPC has approved 4 emergency motions. Composite Emergency Motion 1 on public sector pay will be moved by PCS and seconded by POA and supported by FBU. Emergency Motion 2 on Jesus Santrich will be moved by Unison and seconded by ASLEF. Emergency Motion 3 on defend journalism in the public interest will be moved by the NUJ. Emergency Motion 4 on cuts to the UNWRA and the nation-state law will be moved by ASLEF and seconded by Unite. I'll let Congress know when I hope to be able to take those emergency motions. Linda also reported that it's very important, I'm going to say this, it's very important to respect speaking times, 5 minutes for moving a motion and 3 minutes for seconding a motion for all other speakers. I'd also like to add it's not compulsory to use all that time. Delegates, before we start the formal business, can I just remind you that each delegate credential has a barcode on it. When you are speaking, in the front rows, a steward will come and scan the barcode, and this will allow us to see your name and the union on the main screen during your speech. And finally, Congress, can I remind you of our statement of conduct in the Congress Guide. As you'd expect, all delegates, visitors, staff and facilitators are expected to behave in a courteous manner. Aggressive, offensive, intimidatory, disrespectful or unacceptable behaviour of any kind has no place here and will not be tolerated. But I'm absolutely sure every delegate will respect that statement of conduct. Congress, we start with Section 3 of the General Council report, Respect and a Voice at Work. the section on equalities, which is on page 38. I'll explain how I intend to take the debate on sexual harassment. I'm going to take composite 5, fighting sexual harassment in the creative industries, motion 36, sexual harassment, and paragraph 310 of the General Council report as a single debate. First, I'm going to call a mover, seconder, and supporter of composite 5. I'm then going to call the mover and seconder of motion 36. Then I will call other speakers. After that, the mover of composite motion 5 and motion 36 will have the right to reply in that order. We'll then vote on composite motion 5 and motion 36 in that order. Is that clear? Yeah? Thank you. And before I go any further, I realise I haven't introduced myself. I'm Sally, and I hope that we have a good Congress. So on that note, can I call paragraph 310 and composite 5, fighting sexual harassment in the creative industries? The General Council support the composite motion, moved by Equity, seconded by the Musicians' Union, supported by Prospect. Equity.
Maureen Beattie, President of Equity, moving composite 5. Fighting sexual harassment and discrimination. This is my first time speaking at Congress. Congress, I would like to begin by reading the affirmation which Equity is encouraging members to read aloud at the beginning of every new venture. Every single one of us working on this project is entitled to work in a safe space, a space free of fear, a space free of bullying and harassment of any kind. We will work together, honouring our differences and celebrating the gifts we each bring to the table. We will treat one another with politeness and respect at all times, and if we are subjected to or witness bullying or harassment, we will speak out, knowing that our voices will be heard and we will be taken seriously. Together, we can create a safe space. Congress, no one should be made to feel unsafe in their workplace. For far too long, the standards and expectations of behaviour in the entertainment industry have fallen far short of what is acceptable. Some of this is because of the insecurity and precarious working that characterises so much of the economy now, and some of it is just a simple lack of respect for people doing their job. In the entertainment industry, clear boundaries for behaviour that should be present at all times are not always recognised, and at worst, are ignored. This is a problem that can extend to audiences, who sometimes fail to differentiate between a performer and the fictional character they are portraying, or the dance that they are performing, or the comedy routine that they have written. Earlier this year, I led the Sexual Harassment Working Group set up within our union in response to the Weinstein allegations. We heard from people working across the industry, actors, directors, stage managers, dancers, variety artists, street performers, LGBT+ workers, disabled workers, our Black and ethnic minority members, and many others. They told us of the everyday abuse they faced and described it as the norm. Many of these testimonies were shocking and distressing, as are those of the world-famous performers who have come forward with enormous courage to add their personal stories to the great movement for change. But when the media spotlight finally runs out of headlines and moves on to the next big thing, and the perpetrators of this kind of behaviour crawl back out from the shadows where they've been lurking, Equity will still be there, in it for the long haul, along with our fellow unions. The Agenda for Change report, which was published in February as an outcome of our working group, seeks through practical recommendations to create the culture shift that is the proper response to the recent tide of horrifying revelations of sexual harassment. We will be present in every workplace through our Safe Spaces campaign. Its posters and the affirmation statement I read out earlier, reminding those in power and those working for them that we will not tolerate bad behaviour and will hold engagers to account. And at the legislative level, we will seek to confront unfair and inappropriate non-disclosure agreements. We have been alerted to NDAs, which include provisions for forbidding anything that occurs in the casting or production process to be made public. Similarly, we desperately need and are gaining support for the extension of time limits for submitting tribunal claims to at least 6 months. Too few people are able to get redress at the moment for what they have been through. Last year, a young member brought us a case of sustained harassment and discrimination she had endured at a touring theatre company. Supported by equity, she won over £10,000 in court. Speaking about the catalogue of abuse she faced, she said, "One of the men talked about my vagina, my breasts. They asked me for a threesome, asked me to have sex on a daily basis. They took a picture of me when I was asleep and drew an ejaculating penis on it and put it on social media. If it wasn't for the union, I wouldn't have been able to take them to court. I wouldn't have been able to afford the solicitor's fee, and I got a lot of emotional support. For all the others, like that young woman, we need your support as the TUC to change the legal framework governing harassment and discrimination in this country. Thank you. Please support the motion."
Musicians Union.
Chair Conference, Barbara White, Musicians Union, speaking in support of Composite 5. I'm sure that many of you have heard of the phrase, the casting couch. Sadly, it's very true. An employer or a person in a position of power and authority will sometimes use that power and authority on a subordinate with the promise of a career advancement. And I think that everybody in this hall today knows that is wrong. I agree 100% with my colleague who's just moved this composite, and I am proud that my union, although only a small craft union, is doing so much to raise awareness of this vile problem. It must be dealt with by bystander training, advice and support, cultural changes, whistleblowing, and by creating an environment where people can share and discuss any harassment issues confidentially. One of the things that rang a bell with me was the use of bad humour. I'm pleased to say that this has almost disappeared now, but how will I remember as a very young musician being told, "Sorry, we'd forgotten you were here," or "You don't mind, do you?" This might seem a very small thing, but I remember blushing and being embarrassed by these words. Thank goodness we appear to have moved forward. This is a very difficult situation for women who are self-employed. The vast majority of women in this situation don't report it, as they haven't got easy access to make a complaint. Of course, it can be done via their union, but many seem reluctant to do this. Why? Because they are frightened to speak up for fear of losing future work. Understanding that it is difficult for individuals who have suffered bullying and harassment to speak out, it is very important for them to know that their confidentiality will be respected where possible, and aim to make the process of reporting clear, straightforward, and accessible. Sexual harassment at work has been hidden for generations, brushed under the carpet. For years, colleagues have warned each other how to avoid the boss and colleagues who can't keep their hands to themselves. Knowing that we are all internationalists, I would like to tell you about something that happened in Delhi. It was a festival, and being a festival, there was music and dancing, and one of the favourite things are the balloons. The majority of the dancers were women, and they were subjected to balloons being thrown at them filled with semen. Once again, women trying to entertain being subjected to a most awful form of sexual harassment. Chances are they might not have a union to turn to, so we must ensure that our education programs reach far and wide. My union takes this very seriously and have already excluded one member. People have to stop doing this, just because it's a crime, but because it's wrong. Please support the composite.
Prospect. Do I have a speaker from Prospect? Yes, I do.
Hiya. President Congress, Ellie Wade from Prospect, speaking in support of Composite Motion 5. And unfortunately, I'm here to highlight just the mundane ubiquity of sexual harassment as part of work. Much of the media focus on sexual harassment has been on public figures, and this may create a sense of distance from the experiences of ordinary workers. But aspects of work in the creative industries which seem to be linked to higher levels of harassment are also present across very many of our members' workplaces. So things like being male-dominated or male-led, permissiveness towards sexism, vulnerable employment, as we heard before, and exaggerated power dynamics. These factors seem to be linked to higher levels of harassment, but it's clear that nowhere is immune. Prospect recently surveyed our members, and we find that women are much more likely than men to have experienced sexual harassment. Women working in broadcasting and entertainment are more likely than women in our other sectors, and younger workers are more likely than older workers to have done so. We also found that workers in archaeology were much more likely to have been harassed in any sense by third parties. As a union, we represent workers across a wide range of different sectors and different types of employer. The Me Too movement has highlighted just how common sexual harassment is, especially in the creative industries. But we want to emphasise that this issue extends well beyond those in the public eye. Our movement must lead change here. We know that reported incidents are the tip of the iceberg. TUC research from 2016 found that 4 in 5 women did not report sexual harassment to their employer, and a recent Prospect survey showed that while members were more inclined to report to their union, still 30% of women and 24% of men would be disinclined to do so. For these reasons, Prospect advises employers to view any disclosure of sexual harassment as a watershed. To handle it well builds trust, to fail to do so undermines it. And we must do the same. We must recognise that each report we see represents many others who have not spoken up. We must recognise that how we handle reports affects whether members trust us to tell us about harassment in the future. We have a duty to do this well. We must recognise too that trade unions have many of the features I talked about before, those associated with environments where sexual harassment flourishes. We are traditionally and often still male-dominated or led, and strongly hierarchical. We must take a lead and actively assert and commit to tackling sexual harassment and discrimination. We must show that members are safe to place their trust in us. This means actively promoting the General Council's statement on sexual harassment and implementing policies that embody its principles. And it means working with others, with each other, with employers and with industry bodies, as the BEC2 sector of Prospect did with equity to shape the BFI principles, as you've heard. Please support the motion. Thank you.
I call motion 36, sexual harassment. The General Council support the motion, moved by Vicky Knight on behalf of the TUC Women's Conference and seconded by RMT. Can I, whilst you're getting to the stage, Vicky, just call GMB, Unite, Prospect, AUE, NAS, NEU, NUJ and Unison? Can you just be at the front and ready? Thank you. Vicky.
Congress, comrades, Vicky Knight, UCU, on behalf of the TUC Women's Conference, moving motion 36. Sexual harassment is defined, as I'm sure you'll know, in the Equality Act 2010, as unwanted conduct of a sexual nature which has the purpose or effect of violating someone's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading or humiliating environment for them. It includes unwanted sexual advances, propositions, demands for sex and sexual favours, comments about your body or your clothing, offensive materials being displayed around your workplace, physical contact, any touching, and ultimately sexual assault. I wonder just how many people in this hall have experienced any of these behaviours. You may think them a thing of the past, but Congress, you would be surprised. I know that in a recent survey of our members in UCU, with almost 2,000 respondents, 54% reported personal experience of some form of sexual harassment at work. 2/3 of these acts were perpetrated by a colleague and a quarter by students. Yet the most difficult reading in those findings was the effects that it had on the recipients of that behaviour. So what did it do to them? They lost confidence. They experienced low self-esteem, depression, fear of going to work, therefore increased absences from work, anxiety, sleeplessness, anger, humiliation, and ultimately suicidal feelings. Clearly, comrades, this is an industrial issue, and a health and safety issue, and an equality issue, and therefore this must be a priority trade union issue, and one of epic proportions. An improved and more effective response is required now more than ever. And the TUC's research shows sexual harassment is a very real workplace issue for more than 50% of women at work, and less than 1 in 5, as we've just heard, ever report it. 1/3 of our young members, our young workers, experience it, and the rise of the Me Too movement shows us that's alive and well around the globe. From the President's Club to the President of the United States, and his vile sexism and objectification of women, including his pussy-grabbing comments that went viral, yet they went unchecked by the world who was watching, unchecked and unpunished, whilst undermining the value and the status and the worth of women and girls around the globe in one fell swoop. But this is not just a societal issue, comrades. As a workplace issue, we really need to push back onto employers the responsibility for what's happening on their watch, what's happening on their premises, and we need a strong, effective policy and procedure for dealing with sexual harassment. Educating employees and employers, by the way, identifying behaviours, having robust, secure reporting structures to enable people to come forward with confidence and devoid of fear. And as a TUC this year, we've been leaders in issuing a strong General Council statement and clear guidelines about our values and expectations for behaviour and conduct. However, Women's Conference believe that we need to do more. We need a campaign that yet again raises the profile higher of sexual harassment, to fight for the eradication of sexual harassment in the workplace, for provision of training for all reps on supporting members and helping deal with what can be really complex cases. We need to ensure that all employees and all unions have policies and procedures themselves. Because Congress, and I have to say this, I'm duty-bound, our movement is not immune, and we would be fooling ourselves if we supposed that we were. There are victims and there are perpetrators of sexual harassment in our movement. So Congress, we need to be bold, we need to be confident, swift and strong when responding to sex discrimination, sexual harassment, gender-based violence, and we must be leaders, and we must demand that all follow. I move.
Thank you. RMT.
Chair Conference, Mary Jane Herbertson, Union of Rail and Maritime Transport Workers, rising to support this motion. Recent coverage of the Me Too campaign has brought to the forefront the day-to-day struggle of women in our society. This unspoken problem has been going on for decades. I work in a male-dominated industry. I had to endure the banter and inappropriate comments frequently. I'm strong enough to answer back, but unfortunately there's plenty of others who suffer in silence. Education does play a vital role. The employers have to be educated that some of their staff are treated terribly by fellow colleagues. It's not acceptable and should not continue. Training of reps is also very important so that they know how to support their members. Members who are brave enough to report this abuse must be supported. Highlighting successes means that those being abused feel the confidence to come forward and not suffer in silence. The RMT Union will work with companies that we negotiate with to eradicate this endemic in our workplaces. Please support.
Thank you. I can see I've got 5 speakers at the front. I'm just going to call out in order. GMB, lovely. Have I got Unite? Prospect? Nope. Off the list. AUE? Nope. NAS? Oh, you're there. Sorry, beg your pardon. I thought you were here. Right, off you go.
Okay. President Congress, Lorraine Winson speaking on behalf of the GMB in support of this motion. A crucial line in this motion for our union is the call for recognition of self-employed workers in the Equality Act 2010. In our union, we've got members who are foster carers, private hire drivers, couriers, translators who are rightly or wrongly classified as self-employed. They are just as vulnerable to discrimination and harassment as other workers, and they need support too. As trade unionists, we must continue the fight against sexual harassment and discrimination, but we need better legal tools to do this. At a time when more people than ever are coming forward to share their experiences of sexual harassment and discrimination, such as the Me Too movement, we still face considerable legal barriers to protect and empower workers. The limited time frame for claims and excessive use of non-disclosure agreements hide and protect repeat offenders and discriminatory employers. The government should be helping victims of sexual harassment, but instead they've removed some of the regulations that help us hold employers to account. We commend the motion for calling for the reinstatement of the Statutory Equality Questionnaire, which used to help us better monitor and target bad employers. In 2014, the questionnaire was replaced with ACAS guidance, against the wishes of 83% of the consultation participants, an attempt by this Tory government to cut red tape. But that red tape was our protection. What use is guidance? We need rights, and nothing will be good enough for us until our clear statutory rights are reinstated. If employers are given the option, they'll always go for the easy one. Whether harassment is from a colleague or a third party, it often takes people a long time to process the incident, which is why it's so important we give workers the space and more time to come forward. It can take time to overcome concerns that you will be believed or to check what occurred was actually severe enough to warrant taking action. 3 months to report is nowhere near enough. We must recognise the time needed to be able to process an experience of sexual harassment and to feel able to tell others, let alone make a decision to take on your employer, especially in a society which all too often blames and belittles those who summon the courage to speak out. The GMB supports the call for more rights and legislation to support victims of sexual harassment at work and stronger rights for directly employed workers and the self-employed. Congress, please support the motion.
Thank you. Unite.
Tracy Whittle, Unite. I was also at the Women's TUC this year, and this was a topic that I got up for there as it's very close to my heart. I'm a construction worker, and sexual harassment has been, if you like, following me for the last 18 years while I've been a painter and decorator. Some of the guys that think the banter is acceptable, the comments of while you're down there while I'm painting a piece of skirting became, like the other lady said, part of the norm. I'm strong enough to deal with it. But when I actually said to the same guys that say while you're down there, while he was fitting the bit of skirting, oh, while you're down there then, he looked at me in disgust and I said, well, if you like that sort of thing, you know, don't you think I like somebody there as well sometimes? He didn't know quite what to say to me, And I'm like, well, if you don't like it being said to you, stop saying it to me. This was several years in. We do need to call for separate legislation on sexual harassment because even the managers don't know the difference. You go into an office full of men and you say, this has happened, and they went, that's normal, isn't it? Well, normal in your eyes, yes, but should I have to put up with it on a daily basis? Do you want me to come into this office every single time one of those guys have offended me out there? Because I will tell you now, you will not stop writing because every time I get out there, they'll bitch and moan that I've just been in to complain about them in the first place. They don't understand they need proper guidance for themselves, for the workforce and for everybody else so that there is the clear lines. As at Unite, we have been following the White Ribbon campaign. I know this isn't sexual harassment, but it's still harassment. We need the men to stand up and to fight if they witness it. Because in my industry, if the men don't get up and fight about it, it will go unheard. Please support. Thank you.
Well done. Prospect. Prospect. What's Prospect there? Okay. The next one I have is AUE. Is that you? Welcome.
Lorraine Monk, Artist Union England. We represent visual applied and socially engaged artists supporting Composite 5 and Motion 36. The majority of our members are women, and indeed many of our members are self-employed, with all the alienation that results with. Sexual harassment is as prevalent in our industry as it is in every other entertainment industry. And 62% of undergraduates studying art and design are female and therefore subject to the sexual harassment identified by UCU and other unions in colleges and universities. A survey commissioned by the Fawcett Society recently identified that only 31% of women artists features in London's commercial galleries, with a similar figure for solo shows. That is similar to studies across Europe and America. Women artists earn substantially less than men throughout their lives. And in all the major collections in the US and Europe, only 30% of works displayed are by women artists. Sexual harassment is about power, and the history of art reflects that. In July this year, the National Gallery in London bought a painting by Artemisia Gentilescalia. It was 27 years since it last purchased a painting by a woman. That is 21 paintings they now have out of a collection of 2,300, less than 1%. Though the percentage of naked women in sexually explicit poses in the National Gallery must be well over 90%, that is. And therefore, you have more representation of women in that than you do women as artists. This isn't our heritage, and this shouldn't be the message to school children and to students going to galleries and museums. We have to contest the narrative that men are artists and women are sexually compliant. Women artists, like other women workers, demand equal treatment, equal representation, and equal pay, as well as legislation in order to fight sexual harassment and discrimination. We need theatre and film, music and art to reflect women with all their power, intelligence and strength. We need to construct the stories and not be the victims of them, and stop sexual harassment wherever it comes in our society. Thank you.
And ASUWT. My apologies for not spotting you over there.
President, Congress, Catherine Salt, NASUWT, the Teachers Union, speaking in support and fighting sexual harassment in creative industries. Congress, the NASUWT Teachers Union, wholeheartedly supports this important motion. Fighting sexual harassment and discrimination is a legitimate trade union issue, and one that requires a robust response from the whole of the trade union movement. It is truly shocking that the TUC's own research shows that more than half of women polled in their workplace had experienced some form of sexual harassment, some of which had been labelled as banter. Can someone please explain to me what banter is? What is this word banter that we're allowed to use it against women? Congress, the NAS UWT, believes that workplace sexual harassment is a symptom of wider problems in society, which totally undervalues women and their contribution, hence modern-day sexism. Evidence from our own research shows that sexual harassment creates a hostile and intimidating workplace environment, which is damaging on the impact and the physical and mental health and well-being of women teachers. My union has highlighted that women and girls are increasingly experiencing sexual abuse and harassment, from upskirting to down blousing online. I really don't understand this, and I really don't understand why it was stopped in Parliament. Changes to the law have been outlined in this motion as one solution. However, the solution has to come from cultural change, from the whole of society. A cultural change where employers must adopt a zero-tolerance approach to ensure harassment and bullying are eliminated totally from workplaces. We need policies that prohibit sexual harassment, and they are adopted and all incidents are recorded, acted upon and monitored. In education, teachers need to be trained in dealing with the sensitive issues of girls' sexualised behaviour. Congress, the General Council, has rightly recognised that women within the trade union movement are not exempt from the threat of inappropriate sexual advances and sexual harassment. The NAS UWT has welcomed and fully endorsed the TUC's statement of sexual harassment. Congress, we must continue to show leadership in order to end the perverse and harmful practice of workplace sexual harassment. Congress, please support. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the NEU followed by NUJ and Unison.
President, Congress. Louise Atkinson, of the National Education Union, speaking in favour of Motion 36. Guidance released by the DfE in May this year states that sexual violence and sexual harassment can occur between two children of any age and any sex. It can also occur through a group of children sexually assaulting or sexually harassing a single child or a group of children. A report published last year by the Parliamentary Women Inequalities Committee exposed the disgusting widespread reality of sexual harassment of pupils in our schools. And this booklet that we produce along with UK Feminista paints a vivid picture of the reality of school life for many young people. Please pop to our stand to collect one, and as any good teacher, it comes along with some excellent stickers. As the motion states, sexual harassment is sadly endemic in our society, and the sexual harassment and mistreatment of young people is frighteningly prevalent in our schools and colleges. It is an utter disgrace that almost a third of 16 to 18-year-old girls have experienced unwanted touching in school, and that nearly 3/4 of learners regularly hear terms such as slut and slag used towards girls and young women in schools. And most shockingly, 59% of girls and young women aged between 13 and 21 reported that they had faced some form of sexual harassment in their school or college. Young people told the Parliamentary Committee that sexual harassment had become a normal part of daily school life. Girls reported that they were worried daily about what to wear to school for fear of having their skirt lifted, their bra pulled, or being inappropriately touched. My own daughter at 13 has now stopped wearing skirts to school. It is absolutely disgraceful and an indication of how attitudes are ingrained at an early age, and we just can't continue to accept this. Since sex education was first introduced to schools, the world has changed drastically. Due to huge developments in technology, access to the internet, file sharing, children of primary age are now learning about sex and relationships through hardcore pornography. As a result, nearly half of girls aged 14 to 17 who reported an intimate relationship have experienced some form of sexual violence from their partner. Paragraph 3 of this motion states that trade unions have a vital role to play in educating employers and employees. But I would go further, and I would say that as a movement, we must play a role in teaching our young people to treat others with respect, and we must show our young people how to stand up against abuse of this kind before it becomes part of normal life. The National Education Unions campaigned on the issue of sex and relationship education, and the government have shown that they are listening. But it is going to be compulsory, but it must also be age appropriate across all key stages, and most importantly, fit for the complexities of the digital age that our young people are now growing up in. If our young people continue to be exposed to sexual harassment in schools and are beginning to accept it as part of daily school life, what possible hope do they have when entering the workplace? Young people go to school to learn, not to be abused, and they deserve the right to learn without fear of attack or abuse. At the National Education Union, we will not stop shouting until every single young person in education is treated with dignity and respect. The National Education Union fully support this motion, and we urge you to as well. Thank you.
NUJ and Unison, and then I'm going to go to the vote.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Congress. Penny Quinton for the National Union of Journalists. Obviously, in every profession, in every workplace, women experience sexual harassment. I started work as a Saturday girl at the age of 15. I experienced sexual harassment. I'm now 47. I still experience sexual harassment while working as a researcher in the Middle East. It doesn't stop. It must be addressed. We need statutory legislation to do this, and we need to strengthen our rights. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Unison.
Congress, President, Pam Sayan speaking in support of the motion on behalf of Unison. Congress, sexual harassment is a form of violence against women. It is unwanted behaviour and is done with the purpose of violating a person's dignity. It creates an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating and an offensive environment for the victim. While some people may treat sexual harassment as a joke, its effects certainly cannot be laughed off. Victims of sexual harassment are reporting negative effects on their mental health, confidence and physical health. It's the very point of sexual harassment. It aims to undermine and humiliate the victim. It can be daunting to stand up to sexual harassment, but the law is there as a backup. The TUC report, Still a Bit of Banter, shockingly reports that over half of the women in the UK have experienced sexual harassment at work. This highlights the seriousness of the situation that is so often excused with the phrase harmless banter. A recent joint report by Unison and the London School of Economics highlights that a staggering 49% of police staff surveyed had heard sexualised jokes and been repeatedly told at work, and a fifth had received explicit emails and texts from colleagues. Unison has debated set policy and campaigned on the issue of violence against women for many years. We have worked with many of the women's voluntary sector expert groups to learn, collaborate, campaign and to reduce, eliminate and protect women from violence. Unison strongly supports the call for the reinstatement of the Strategy Equality Questionnaire. We support the call for the change in law to ensure recognition of the third-party harassment claims and also investigating the use of non-disclosure agreements by employers. Sadly, sexism is an everyday nightmare for women. Just look at the American president for a start. I only wish I could wake up from this bad dream. Unfortunately, one does not have much control over the unexpected behaviour of others, but together we can certainly challenge it. Together we can call on the government and employers to do more to protect all those that are affected. And I, for one, am determined that our workplaces, at the very least, must be free from sexual harassment, because one thing I can guarantee you, Congress, is that sexual harassment is definitely not in any job description. So let's get active as stewards, as Unison members, to ensure that such behaviour in the workplace is never tolerated, that our employers and our work colleagues always take the issue seriously, that dignity at work policies are in place and properly implemented. Thank you, Congress. Please support.
Thank you. I've heard no speeches again, so I'm assuming we're not going to be making use of the right to reply equity. No. Vicky Knight for the Women's Conference? No. I'm going to call the vote. I'm calling the vote on composite motion number 5. All those in favour, will you please show? Thank you. Against? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. I'm now going to call the vote on motion 36. Those for, will you place your... Goodness me, will you raise your hands? Thank you. Those against? Again, unanimous. Thank you very much, Congress. I now call motion 37, We Trust Women and Abortion Rights. The General Council supports this motion. It's moved by the RCM and seconded by Unison. While they're coming to the stage, can I ask NAS, UCU, NEU and Prospect to be ready to speak, please? Thank you. Go ahead.
Congress, please forgive me, this is my first time speaking. As a midwife, it is an honour for me to move this motion on behalf of the Royal College of Midwives. Congress, we trust women. Congress, it is 2018. We have made amazing medical and technological advances in the 21st century. Yet abortion remains a criminal offence. We still do not trust women to make their own decisions. This is a women's right issue, and we as trade unionists have a duty to campaign for women's rights. The 1967 Abortion Act only permits abortion under certain conditions. It does not repeal the 1861 Offences Against the Persons Act, which criminalises a woman having an abortion and the person providing it. In 2016, the RCM took a decision which I believe was a brave and right thing to do. We published our position statement supporting the decriminalisation of abortion. We were vilified by certain sections of the media. I think you can guess which sections that was. But we continue to stand by our long-held belief that women should have the choice over their own fertility and over all aspects of their maternity care, including whether to have a baby or not. This position is not in conflict with, in fact, it reaffirms our support for midwives or any other healthcare worker to hold a position of individual conscientious objection. The RCM supports the We Trust Women campaign. Their website lists evidence-based reasons to decriminalise abortion. I do not want to reinvent the wheel, so here they are. Women are risking prosecution for ending a pregnancy. No woman takes the decision to have an abortion lightly. Imagine what it might feel like if that decision is a criminal one. In 2015, 16,645 abortion pills were seized on their way to addresses in England, Wales and Scotland. Over 100 packets of illegal abortion pills have been seized by police in Northern Ireland in a recent crackdown. And in 2016, a woman in Northern Ireland who bought abortion medication online was given a jail sentence. An abortion is illegal in Northern Ireland. This outdated and cruel law can make doctors unwilling to authorise abortions and deters them from working in this field. Because of this, women regularly continue pregnancies they do not want because they cannot find doctors who are willing or able to treat them. There is absolutely no evidence that decriminalisation would lead to an increase in abortion or number of later abortions. Again, this comes back to our view of women. Can you really imagine that we want to undergo an abortion, that we do not take responsibility to avoid an unplanned pregnancy? The abortion rate in this country is stable. In Canada and Australia, abortion is no longer a criminal act. There has been no increase in abortion rate or an increase in later terminations. The law is Victorian and at odds with healthcare professionals who overwhelmingly back change. It is also out of date with public opinion. In 2017, a survey found that 2/3 of people did not support imprisoning women who end a pregnancy without a doctor's authorisation. Before I finish, I want to touch on an area that might be more comfortable for many of you in the room, the workplace. For most of us, workplace issues are what we deal with day in, day out. So let's not forget that abortion is also a workplace issue. Women struggle to take time off for an abortion, not knowing if they are able to ask for sick leave. They are unwilling to disclose to their employer what they are going through, perceiving that there is a stigma associated with abortion. So let's not only campaign for a women's rights and the decriminalisation of abortion, but also, when we are in the workplace, think a little bit more about what someone might be going through. Abortion is a women's issue and a healthcare issue. It is not a matter for criminal law. Please support the motion.
Thank you, Udison.
President, Congress, Carol Sewell, seconding motion 37 on behalf of Unison. Unison is proud to second the RCM motion on abortion rights. A woman has the right to her own body integrity and the right to control over her own reproduction. This is because our reproductive rights are crucial to our freedom as women. But I don't think the law agrees with this, because presently, a woman who ends her own pregnancy without permission of doctors can be sentenced to life in prison. No woman should have to face prison for choosing to end a pregnancy. Abortion should be governed by the same regulatory and ethical frameworks which govern all other medical procedures in the UK. The 1967 Abortion Act gave women limited access to safe abortion, but that right has now to be defended many times since 1967, and our trade union movement has always been central to that defence. Prior to 1967, around 100,000 illegal abortions were carried out each year in Britain, and it estimated that 35,000 women were hospitalised each year due to botched backstreet abortions. No one really knows how many women have actually died, but one estimates it's that 15% of all maternal deaths were a result of botched backstreet abortions. Congress, we welcome the recent yes vote in the Republic of Ireland to repeal part of its constitution that effectively outlawed abortion. This puts added pressure on the Northern Ireland and the Westminster government to finally take action. A woman's right to choose with regards to abortion is fundamental to her political, social and economic equality. The right is so important, and I quote from Women's Real Stories, "My body, my life." 1 in 3 women will have an abortion in her lifetime. They face the difficult decision of how to deal with an unplanned pregnancy. Women who do make the decision do not do so without much soul-searching. That decision then stays with them forever. We should be able to trust women to make their own decisions about their pregnancies without the threat of prosecution. The fight for a woman's right to choose is a global fight, and it is a fight that we are fully committed to. Congress, I want to urge you all to go back to our different unions and continue the fight to decriminalise abortion across the UK. Thank you. Please support the motion.
Thank you. I call NASUWT to be followed by UCU.
President, Congress, Debbie Hayton, NASUWT, the Teachers Union, speaking in support of Motion 37, We Trust Women, Abortion Rights. The NASUWT has a long-standing support for the Women's Charter, which challenges many long-held beliefs in our society about the role of women. The Charter seeks to bring together key demands for which progressive women are fighting for equality. One of these key demands is social policy and a woman's right to choose. The Charter, supported by NASUWT, believes that all women should have access to and a right to an abortion. The We Trust Women campaign highlights a long-overlooked law which came into force in 1861. Congress, this law was agreed by men about women nearly 60 years before all women had the right to vote. This harsh Victorian law criminalises abortion in a way no other medical procedure does today. The NASUWT believes that abortion is a woman's rights issue. The UK abortion law deems that it is not the woman who makes the choice about her own body, and she still has no right to end an unwanted pregnancy. Society has deemed that abortion is something rarely spoken about, yet 1 in 3 women will experience at least one termination in their lifetime. Congress, this equates to around 10 million women in the UK today. Surely these 10 million women should have been allowed to make their own decisions about their own bodies without relying on the decision of 2 strangers. The decision to have an abortion, contrary to popular myth, is rarely taken lightly. The current system fails women. Requiring 2 signatures can cause delays, and coupled with numerous appointments before women are able to access an abortion, often means that women suffer unnecessary stress and anxiety during this time. Countries that have decriminalised abortion have not seen an increase in the rate of terminations, and there's no reason why the UK would fare any different. It remains unacceptable that in 2018, women are still being discriminated against by strict Victorian laws nearly 150 years old. If women really are equal, surely the laws of the land must reflect this. Congress, please support the motion.
Thank you. You see? I've then got NEU and Prospect, yeah? Lovely, thank you.
Good afternoon, Congress. Rhiannon Lockley, UCU. As an educator, I'm proud to represent the academics who use their work to advance the ethics and rights arguments for women, as well as those who track those who oppose women at clinics and other places. As an educator, I'm aware that many students, but also colleagues, don't realise that abortion is still criminal. There's no rationale for the criminalisation of a medical procedure. Continued criminalisation sends a powerful message to and about the women who choose to terminate pregnancy. I'm proud to represent UCU members and of our affiliation to abortion rights, but I also stand here as a mother of an 8-year-old girl in a world where the future of her body is a battleground. This is a child growing up in a world where a misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic, disablist bigot is recognised as our global leader. My daughter's body belongs to her and her alone. It's hers to swim and run and jump and try, admittedly, because she's got my level of agility, not very successfully, to do handstands. Her body is not an ornament, an object or a decoration, and it's not a vessel that's owned by the church or the state. When we fight for decriminalisation, we fight for my child and all of our children. There's a powerful force out there at the moment trying to turn the clock back on bodily autonomy. It's a force embodied in that iconic photograph of a room full of white men signing a death sentence for women, disproportionately black and disabled women, and the signing off of the global gag to remove US funding from NGOs which counsel or refer abortions as any part of their work. By fighting for decriminalisation, we fight against that threat and for a just future. The TUC has a proud history in the fight for abortion rights, mobilising on the streets and pushing for change. As already mentioned, we've had key breakthroughs in Ireland and for our Northern Irish sisters, and most recently, change in English ruling, meaning soon women will be able to take the second abortion pill at home rather than facing the potential humiliation of heavy bleeding on their journey back from a clinic. In my city of Birmingham, we've historically been the target of the March for Life group. This is a US-funded umbrella group addressed this year for the first time by the President of the United States in Washington, which targets Birmingham, our city, as a hellmouth because of its place as the home of the first BPAS clinic. Historically, every year they've marched through our city with their politics of shame. It's trades unions working with abortion rights who've worked to oppose this unwanted harassment of women on our streets. Last year, after years of counter-demonstrations, we blocked the streets and turned them around, and they've not been back. This is solidarity in action and the power that we have when we act together. Women are rational decision makers. If you cannot trust us over our bodies, you cannot trust with us over anything. Our bodies, our lives, our right to decide. Thank you.
Thank you. Where am I? NEU, please, followed by Prospect. Then I'll be calling the vote.
President Conference, Marilyn Bater, National Education Union, supporting the motion. Congress, how is it that an act, the Offences Against the Person Act of 1861, still impacts so negatively on women today? And we as a movement have not acted more rapidly to ensure that women's rights are upheld so that all women can access safe, legal abortions. How is it that women still have the threat of penal servitude for life, even with the 1967 Act that allowed for legal abortion in certain circumstances? Permission is still required to make decisions about our own bodies. Women should be trusted to make decisions about their own bodies and families. Why should someone else have more control over a woman's body than she does herself? This is clearly a women's right issue for us as a movement. The Irish TU movement has carried out a groundbreaking piece of research. Please look it up. Abortion as a workplace issue, a TUC survey in the north and south of Ireland. The findings cover many issues, but I'd like to concentrate mainly now on quoting some of the work and findings of that survey, saying that abortion is a workplace issue. Because of the issues of disclosure and the stigma associated with abortion, our members are not taking the sick leave that they have a right to, or paid leave for the procedure and the care after a termination. Women should be able to say, I need time off for a termination or family planning. And if a worker is a partner or parent of someone seeking a termination, they have access to paid leave. A quick quote, I personally had an abortion just last year and struggled to afford it. I couldn't get any time after either, as I work as an agency nurse and do some full-time hours and could not afford to take the time off afterwards. Colleagues, this is a workplace issue. This is our issue. Support the motion.
Thank you. Who have I got left? Prospect.
Claire Mullally, Prospect Union, speaking in favour of this motion. Congress, according to the British Pregnancy Advice Service, every day 3 Northern Irish women either travel abroad to access treatment or buy illegal abortion pills online, risking imprisonment. Risking imprisonment for what? Their right to decide and their body autonomy. Earlier this year, the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, said that every year thousands of women in Northern Ireland face systematic violations of rights through being compelled to either travel outside Northern Ireland to procure a legal abortion or to carry their pregnancy to term. The Vice Chair of CEDAW said that forcing a woman to continue her pregnancy in cases of fetal abnormalities, incest or rape amounts to unjustified state-sanctioned violence. So there we have it, a choice between unjustified state-sanctioned violence or criminalisation. The UN Committee is clear that it is the UK government that is responsible for ensuring that laws are in line with the state's international human rights obligations, not a devolved assembly that collapsed 1 year and 9 months ago. Women must have access to the care and services they need without stigma, and that's why we call for vigilance and resistance to any attempt to extend the scope of conscientious objection. So a wider range of medical practitioners can conscientiously object to providing abortion services, for example, Baroness O'Loan's House of Lords bill. Alliance for Choice in Northern Ireland, for example, support the Swedish model, where there is no conscience provision. We know in Italy that 7 out of 10 public health gynaecologists mandated to perform abortions opt out on conscience. This has led to a 41-year-old woman last year from Padua approaching 23 hospitals to access abortion services. When she was unable to find one, she went to her trade union body, the CGIL, in desperation to fight her case. They found her a provider. We must keep moving forward and not back. On the 28th of May, I was at a rally outside Belfast City Hall, a few days after the 8th result in the Republic of Ireland. We called for free, safe, legal abortions to be provided in Northern Ireland. Yet still this government is silent, and yet still this government is enabling a systematic violation of rights in Northern Ireland. Time to act. Please support this motion.
I've heard no speeches against, so I'm assuming the right to reply isn't going to be needed? No? Okay. I'm going to call the vote. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Those against, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you, Congress. I now call paragraph 37 and motion 38, equal pay, the gender pay gap. The General Council supports the motion, moved by the NUJ, seconded by NEU.
Thanks, President. Michelle Stanistreet from the National Union of Journalists. Colleagues, it's amazing really what a little transparency on pay can achieve. That much became clear last year when the BBC was forced by the government to publish pay details of its presenters and talent earning more than £150,000. It soon became glaringly obvious what had been going on at the corporation. 2/3 of those on that list were men, and there were barely any black faces amongst them. We found out very quickly that it meant that presenters who'd been sitting on the very same TV sofa or working alongside colleagues doing the same job on high-profile radio programmes were getting paid massively different rates. NUJ member Carrie Gracie felt forced to come out fighting in public when she realised that she'd been being paid significantly less than the other male international editors. A survey that we did in the wake of that made it absolutely clear that this was not a problem confined to those on high salaries at the BBC. It was entrenched within the very poorest paid journalists and reporters, right to those at the top of the salary scales. The NUJ's worked hard to take the corporation to task on this issue ever since. We've submitted over 200 equal pay claims involving NUJ members, and the unions managed to secure for many of these women an increase in their salaries, backdated pay, and other payments. It's also inspired loads of other women in many other workplaces to come forward and to tackle their problems of equal pay as well. And thanks to a lot of collective effort on behalf of the joint unions at the BBC, we're now starting to see a change in culture and practice, including clearer salary structures and much more transparency, although there's still a long way to go, and the progress that individual cases we have outstanding does remain frustratingly slow. But by the time the deadline for the implementation of the gender pay gap audits came round in April, when it became mandatory for companies with more than 250 employees to reveal their data on their pay gap and differentials in bonuses between the sexes on their staff, the real scale of this problem really hit home. There's clearly a massive societal problem of gender pay in the UK, which is entrenching inequalities in so many of our workplaces. And in the media sector, it demonstrated that an astonishing 91% of UK-based media companies paid men more than women on average based on the mean hourly rate, and 85% paid men more in bonus pay. Every high street media outlet is guilty on scales far in excess of the crimes of the BBC. At Condé Nast, the publisher of Vogue, GQ and Vanity Fair, the women's mean hourly rate was 37%, meaning women earned 63p for every pound that their male colleagues made. And where there's a gender pay gap, you can almost guarantee that unequal pay is flourishing too. And one of the positive consequences of this grotesque pay gap being exposed is that it's got women talking about pay. It's got women talking about whether they're getting parity in their workplace. It's got people delving into issues that too often remain a secret, a dysfunctional culture fostered by companies for their own ends. And most importantly, it's got women angry, and that's fertile ground for us as trade unions to harness that energy and to organise around. And we know that companies feel really vulnerable about this at the moment because they've got no cogent defence for these appalling practices in their own backyards. Because what can be much more galling at work than realising that the colleague sat next to you who does the same job, who might even have less experience than you, is getting paid more just because he's a bloke. In doing this work, though, it's also vital that as a movement we lead by example, publishing our own data, whether we're above the 250 staff threshold or not, putting meaningful action plans in place to tackle any gaps, and showing real leadership on this issue. And I congratulate the TUC in the pay parity that it's been able to achieve and able to report. I think that's something to be genuinely proud of as a movement, and something that many individual unions can aspire to, because this problem should be one that the movement tackles head on and works collectively to eradicate. That's why we want Congress to prioritise a campaign to tackle pay inequity and to lead the charge to end discrimination in pay and opportunities for women. We want to be pushing for real progression at work, genuinely family-friendly working practices that foster real equality of opportunities and pay, and cultural change that goes way beyond the skin deep. We need fairer employment laws, and we need to extend the provisions of the currently limited gender pay regulations. We need proper, meaningful action plans from companies with teeth, and we need to quicken the pace of change. And doing that, and more importantly, being seen to do that, will ensure that women know that when it comes to equal pay, when it comes to ending the pay gap, when it comes to achieving real equality at work, a woman's place in her natural home is in her trade union, fighting amongst colleagues to eradicate what is a scourge. So colleagues, please support the motion.
I have any to second, and whilst they are speaking, Prospect, I've had an indication that you wanted to speak. Can you come down? You're there. Great. Thank you.
President Congress, Heather Mackenzie on behalf of the NEU to second the motion. Basically, folks, enough is enough, both for equal pay and the continuing gender pay gap. In all sectors, pay parity needs action, which this motion demands change in action from employers, all employers. Employers must be made to change so this doesn't take another 40 years. In the education sector, teachers, education support workers, lecturers, and in schools, in colleges, in academies and independent schools, where 80% plus are women workers, continue to have occupational segregation, where higher paid positions are disproportionately filled by men and, as always, lower paid by women, where access to career progression and pay reflect our society, where gender stereotyping and outdated views direct what we should aspire to and expect in life, and it goes on. The NEU, as you heard earlier, is a campaigning document called Sexism is Just Everywhere, which leads men and women to do different jobs in different sectors, being employed at different pay grades. And this is what we highlight in our document. Every time we hear jokes and arguments that men and women are different in our schools when we're teaching and here today, we need to challenge it. Man up isn't harmless. It is part of this debate. He plays like a girl is reinforcing the myth that boys and men are superior to girls and women. We need to challenge sexism in schools so children and young people, boys and girls, have the chance to form different views so that they can go into their workplaces with a bright future. We now, inside our workplaces, and particularly within our trade unions, need to lead the way on challenging discrimination in pay systems. For us in the education sector, a very important battleground is performance-related pay, which is inherently discriminatory. Performance-related pay increases gender and race discrimination in pay systems. PRP hitting women teachers and black staff hardest, and also teachers who take career breaks or work part-time. We're just stuck in a cycle. I don't need to reinvent or re-go over what we've already heard today. But what you do need to know is that this motion takes the journey forward to push the government to demand that employees make changes. If they don't make these changes, it does have to have teeth, because this is a fight, and it is a fight that we have to win. As they have in Sweden, it needs some teeth. Make them pay if they don't make changes. We need to keep fighting. Conference, I second.
I call Prospect.
Anne Jones from the Beck 2 sector of project, speaking in support of motion 38 from our colleagues at the NUJ. You'll be pleased to hear that as a short person, I'm a great believer in brevity. So with that in mind, I'm going to unashamedly use a quote from Sue Ferns, the Senior Deputy General Secretary of Prospect. Unfair pay thrives where there is secrecy. I'm also going to unashamedly promote the fact that Prospect has developed a gender pay gap e-learning tool, which might be usefully adapted for other unions. This motion rightly calls for information gathering and reporting and training for reps and officials, and is an important start of an ongoing process in which trade unions have a vital part to play. Please support motion 38. And can I apologise if I beep when I go into reverse? Thank you.
I think that was an example of a perfect speech. Thank you very much, Prospect. NUJ, I've heard no speakers against. Do you need your right to reply? No, thank you, Michelle. I'm going to call the vote. Those in favour of motion 38, please show. Thank you. Those against? Again, thank you. It's unanimous. Reverse away. The floor is yours.
Congress, I am delighted to call my good friend Sally Hunt, President of the TUC Congress in its 150th year, to address Congress. Sally.
Congress, thank you. Sally Hunt, TUC President, very proud to be here in Manchester, this brave and radical city in this, our anniversary year. And before I do anything else, I want to say thank you. Thank you to this wonderful movement, all of the extraordinary, hard-working and committed people who make up this Congress of ours. It's such an incredible privilege to be your president, but it's lovely too for me to have members of my family here, particularly my daughter Catherine, my mum who can't be here, but I want to thank her now for the courage that she has shown for all her children and the values that she taught us all. And I want to say hello too to my Auntie Val, who is here. You, along with my Uncle Ivan, taught me many of the trade union values that I hold dear today. You need to know, Congress, that my Auntie Val is a lifelong member of the Labour Party and of her trade union as well, and rightly, she is very proud. She's told me many stories, but I'll share just this one with you today, about her trade union Congress in the 60s, mainly blokes who felt it was right to vote against her and other women like her being allowed to wear trousers to work. Well, for you, Auntie Val, and for all those other women of that time, I'd like to say, for the record, that today, the female president of the TUC is wearing trousers to work. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for starting that argument, because we always get there in the end. So my family have been a rock for me in so many ways, and I'm really pleased to introduce you all to each other. One family to another. Because we're family as well. All of us here together, the trade union family. 150 years ago, just down the road from here, at the Mechanics Institute, 34 delegates met to discuss matters, as they said it, pertaining to the general interests of the working classes. There's been an almost unbroken line of meetings since that date, year on year, building our movement so that today the TUC is recognised as the voice of working people, and we are its custodians. Our different unions are only part of that story, one which will see us in the next few days focusing on our future, how we build our industrial strength, how we grow our numbers, how we expand our political influence, building, growing, taking forward what our forebears started, and taking strength from our movement's birth, our beginnings, our roots. In 1817, 10,000 weavers and spinners gathered just outside this hall. They had blankets, rugs and coats wrapped in bundles under their arms. It was the biggest meeting of its kind ever organised in Manchester. They planned to march to London to draw attention to the poverty from which they suffered. It's the Blanketeers March. Well, the King's Dragoons were sent in to disperse that meeting, which they did, violently, but still they marched and were attacked a mile from here, bullet wounds and sabre cuts inflicted. In 1819, again, just outside this building, 60,000 people gathered to demand parliamentary reform. They wanted a vote that counted. At least 15 people died. The Peterloo Massacre. In 1834, 6 agricultural workers in Tolpuddle swore an oath to support each other. For that, they were sentenced to penal transportation to Australia for their crime. And in 1882, the socialist and anti-fascist Sylvia Pankhurst was born here in Manchester and struggled for years for women's suffrage. And isn't it about time that woman was honoured with a statue in Parliament? Because I think it is. In 1888, women workers at Bryant and May went on strike for better, safer terms and conditions. And in 1900 in Taff Vale, over 1,300 workers went on strike in solidarity with the victimised colleagues. The court then held that the union was liable for the company's losses. In 1910, in Cradley Heath, women chainmakers who had to hammer 5,000 links a week to earn the equivalent of 25p, well, they laid down their tools to demand a living wage, and they did so for 4 long months. 1926, the general strike. 1968, Dagenham. 1972 and 84, the miners' strike. 1989, the ambulance drivers. 2011, public sector pensions. It doesn't matter which place, which industry, there will always be employers or government or both saying no, and there will always be people, trade unionists, workers who will say yes and be willing to fight. We don't always win, but we'll always try, because that's who we are. And we don't limit that to this country. I've just come back from a Justice for Colombia delegation visit in Colombia. There are still trade unionists there being put in jail or killed. But they don't stop fighting. I've been in Palestine, watching young children have rubber bullets shot at them by painfully young conscripts sat on a wall which divides populations and destroys people's lives. But good people, Palestinian and Israeli, don't stop fighting for these injustices to end. I've sat with Zimbabwean trade unionists, their arms in bandages, after beatings, who organise workers who have no resources whatsoever and face real physical danger. I've sat in more than one embassy demanding the release of people unjustly imprisoned. This year, that was South Korean trade union leaders, jailed for their activism. and now, because of us, released. I've been with trade union members giving their time, their resources to refugees and migrants here and abroad. And I've listened in horror, more times than I can count, to the testimony of trade unionists from around the world, arrested, beaten, penalised for defending their rights. It's always a humbling experience, but it is one that's taught me the real value of my trade union card and the absolute need for the TUC to be international in its perspective. Our collective voice matters. It literally saves lives. Congress, if I look around this hall, at this Congress, I see unions doing the same today as they've always done. Equity, with its Safe Space campaign to confront sexual harassment. Unison, defeating the government to secure access to justice for millions of working people. NUJ, defending freedom of speech for their members' safety here and abroad. GMB, fighting for decency at Uber and Amazon, and USDOR doing the same at Lidl and MSF. The PFA, where are you? I don't know, I can't see you. But wherever you are, you're fighting hard to kick racism out of football. And FBU, with everything you've done since Grenfell, respect. Community working to keep a steel industry in this country. EIS, NASUWT, NEU, NAHT, making the case for education, good education, taught by well-rewarded staff. And my own union, fighting for pensions justice. Prospect, science funding, finance unions, staff and customer safety in banks and building societies, ASLEF, RMT, TSSA, all campaigning for a publicly owned, properly staffed railway, and the CWU doing the same for a publicly owned post office. Nautilus, Safe Seaways, the justice unions, a respectful and secure system, the health unions, protecting patients, representing staff, keeping the NHS alive in the face of a sustained right-wing assault. The Bakers Union and McDonald's. Unite, not so large that it won't prioritise 3 branches of TGI Fridays who made the mistake of thinking it was okay to mess around with the tips of minimum wage staff. And next to them, one of our smallest, newest affiliates, the Artists Union, not afraid to prioritise support for a national petition to prevent forced deportations. And all the others, all of you, too numerous to mention, doing everything you can to advance the cause of labour. We are the trade union movement, and we are powerful agents of change. We don't just observe history, we make it. The Trade Union Congress, you, doing what you have always done, standing with and for working people in this country, making sure this is a country for those people. 150 years ago today, and today, the same family, the same fight. So let me return to 1868. Just think what that must have been like, standing with each other for the first time, different industries, different skills, to make common cause. And 20 years later, those match girls, some as young as 12, working 14-hour days, on their feet, forced to buy their own equipment. Well, they got phossy jaw. And for those who don't know what that is, that rots. It rots the inside of your mouth, all to make matches. There was an article written about them at the time saying they were slave labour. It caused an absolute scandal. So their managers asked them to sign statements effectively saying, oh, no, we love our jobs, we love our managers, we love our company. Well, they refused. And one of their number was sacked. It was meant to shut them up. But instead, they walked out and they didn't go back until they got her back, got time off, and got a complaints procedure. Well, Congress, I'm proud that today we've got the great-granddaughter of one of those strike leaders, Sarah Chapman, with us today. I don't know if you can stand up. It's lovely to have you here. So whilst those fantastic young women were doing that, the TUC was meeting, it was organising, growing stronger, as were its unions. And in 1906, they got their strongest vote in Parliament. And one of the first things those trade union-supported MPs did was to pass legislation that turned back Taff-Vale. And then what they did is they made it illegal to use white phosphorus, the same white phosphorus that had rotted the jaws of those young women. I say all of this because in our 150th year, it's worth remembering just how hard those people worked for our benefit. Everything we have today has been fought for by people just like us who came together, stood with each other, sometimes died for each other, to give us decency and dignity. So that when we look at the challenges we have, which are many, we have casualisation, we have Brexit, we have the rising intolerance which is coming through in many places, and it's all coming at us, saying you are worth less. You must work harder. You must feel less secure in your job. None of that is new. And none of that is stuff that we can't deal with. We've done it throughout our history, and we will do it now. Ordinary people like you and me and all those that we represent. I wanted to end with this. 130 years ago, that was something that killed people. Painfully, cruelly, unavoidably. And today it's just a match. And that's because of the trade union movement. And that's you. So happy birthday, and thank you.
Thank you, President. I'd now like to call on Vicky Price to move the vote of thanks to the President.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to start by saying thanks very much for picking me to follow that. But Congress, comrades, Vicky Knight, UCU, moving the vote of thanks to the President, Sally Hunt. On being asked to do this speech, I did what I assume many people do when being asked to talk about somebody. And I Googled her. And what a revelation that was, I have to say. So, comrades, I'm delighted to move the vote of thanks on behalf of Congress to, if Google reports are to be believed, a German-born, Chippenham Comp educated, Students' Union Vice President, ex-nightclub bouncer, and that's true, ex-nightclub bouncer, who has also worked in a bookshop, a Building Society Staff Association, and I quote, General Secretary of the AUT, then UCU, and the leader of the biggest strike in UK higher education history. President of the TUC, lead on international affairs, member of the General Council, the TUC Executive Committee, ACAS board member, and a woman with 2 decades of experience of a trade union leader. Not bad credentials, you may think, for a woman of her youth. But what Google will never tell you, comrades, is about Sally you would only know by knowing the woman herself. She is a staunch defender of the working classes. She's a staunch defender of her members, a socialist, a feminist, and a proud internationalist. She is kind, and she is considerate, and she's compassionate, and she believes very strongly that every voice has a right to be heard. She believes that together we can all make a difference for the better around the globe. She has worked tirelessly for our movement for decades with a coveted CV on her contribution to international work and campaigns. Now, don't worry, Sally, I am not going to mention the raffle for the cow in Colombia last week. You might want to ask her about that in the bar later. But what I will tell you about is her absolute hard work and dedication to campaigns in Colombia, in Palestine, in Turkey, in Egypt, in Zimbabwe, in Cuba, particularly making a stand for our members against Trump's travel ban and the impact on international students and teachers from global conflicts. She has been vocal about the effects of Brexit upon UCU members and has undertaken tireless work for refugees at Calais, supporting those who found themselves in the jungle, with numerous visits there to work in the camps. She has helped to harness UCU as a fighting force for academic freedoms around the globe. She campaigns for education for all, regardless of borders or ability to pay, free at the point of access, and from the cradle to the grave. Sally has prioritised fighting the poisonous agenda of the current government when it comes to education and workers' rights. And she advocates for those who simply cannot for themselves. She challenges the politics of hate. She supports and encourages young workers. She makes women just go for it because she knows that we can, even when we doubt even ourselves. She ensures that disabled members and black members have a strong voice and a seat at every table. She's given 110% to her role as TUC president this year, often squeezing in a speech at a dinner in Tunisia, with meetings early the next morning in London, or a contribution in Brussels, or a few days in Colombia to have a chat with the FARC, attending workshops in Pittsburgh and visiting children's centres in Palestine, giving people like me the passion I have for international causes all around the world. Whilst also being at the forefront of a year for UCU of record membership increases and winning in the workplace. 16,000 new members UCU have attracted because we have proven that taking action makes unions worth joining, and Sally led that. She is a true leader. She's done what we all know trade unionists do in times of responsibility and high demand, which is having to squeeze in a personal life and a family life around the demands of our movement. And thanks also to Sally's family for understanding. I know they share our pride in Sally's achievements. And I want to put special thanks to Auntie Val too, because I've got hideous legs. Thank you for the trousers, Auntie Val. The best thing I can say about Sally is she treats everybody the same. She is impressed by the person, not the rank or the role or their place in the food chain. To her, a worker is a worker, workers are vital, and only workers get the job done. Every job matters, and every worker matters, and we do not and we cannot function without the contribution of every single one. And that brings me to a group of workers that I know are dear to Sally's heart, and that's the workers here at the TUC this week who've supported our Congress so magnificently, making it happen from the planning, preparation by the staff, the Congress Centre, the catering workers, the cleaners, the cooks, the photographers, the digital staff, all of those behind the scenes, as well as those front of house. Without all of them, we could not carry out the business of our movement. So thank you to them. And then the tellers, the scrutineers, the Congress Business Committee, and everyone I've forgotten to mention, thank you for all of your work. Now, Congress, I'm going to ask you to join me in celebration of a fabulous year in the life of a fantastic sister and wish her a wonderful conference. Chair, General Secretary, sister, I know you're going to do us proud yet again. I move the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Vicky. And now I'd like to call on Dave Ward to second the vote of thanks.
Congress, Dave Ward, Communication Workers Union, and it really is a privilege for me to second this vote of thanks to a great comrade, a good friend, our TUC President, Sally Hunt. And I can't think of anybody on the General Council who would make a more appropriate president of the TUC as we celebrate 150 years of our movement. Because there is no doubt that Sally epitomises all of the core values that are fundamental to participating in the struggles that we exist for. Sally is a trade unionist to the core of her DNA and comes from a strong trade union family. Sally's uncle, Ivan Rowley, was a national organiser with the UCW, the forerunner of my own union, the CWU, and a great trade unionist in his own right. And as a child, Sally actually kept an autograph book. And I've seen this, and it was signed by key Labour movement figures of the day, including Tom Jackson, the leader of the Union of Post Office Workers, famous for his handlebar moustache. There's actually a photo of that signed by Tom. Look, Sally is an incredibly warm human being who really does care about people. And she has a great understanding of the need to connect our industrial and our political work. Sally is the General Council lead on international issues and a passionate internationalist, being a huge supporter of justice for Colombia and a strong advocate of Palestinian rights. One of her proudest moments over the last year has been helping to secure the release of 2 jailed South Korean trade unionists. Her time as TUC president coincided with a major industrial dispute in higher education, during which Sally led the fight for pension justice for UCU members. She deserves huge credit in the way in which she combined her TUC role with the heavy workload of being a General Secretary during what was a very difficult dispute. And as Vicky said, I can confirm it's true she was once, in her younger days, a bouncer in various nightclubs in Brighton. No doubt the most polite bouncer that has ever stood in front of a door. And actually, now I come to think of it, on a Beano once, many years ago, from my sorting office, I think I might have come across you. She's also a passionate Arsenal fan. And after doing the double in 1971, 1998 and 2002, along with Francis, our General Secretary, the other Arsenal fan, they've now managed to do the double again on the General Council. However, there is a downside to that, as Tim Roach well knows. It's never actually going to happen again on a football pitch. So Sally has been a General Council member and Union General Secretary for 16 years, and she's been a fantastic TUC president. Courteous, charismatic, humble and humorous, intelligent and incisive. Sally, you have and you always will continue to be an inspiration for our movement, and we are very lucky to have you as our President on this, our 150th Congress. I second.
I think this is where I say enough about me. Let's move on. Thank you, both Vicky and Dave. Congress, I mentioned the Match Girls in my speech a moment ago, and I said one of the Match Girls strike leaders' granddaughter is here, a delegate to the TUC. But I wanted to talk about Sarah Chapman, whose great-great-granddaughter, Samantha Johnson. I'm going to start that again. I'm so embarrassed. I've made an absolute hash of that. I apologise. I'm going to read that paragraph again so that it makes sense. Right. I mentioned in my speech the Match Girls in my speech a moment ago, and one of the Match Girl strike leaders and a delegate to the TUC was Sarah Chapman, whose great-great-granddaughter, Samantha Johnson, is here today. And we already said hello to you, Samantha, and I'm sorry for making a hash about that. But the thing I wanted to tell you about is there's currently a petition to save her grave in Manor Park Cemetery, which nearly 6,000 people have signed. And I'm just going to ask you, all of you, if you could please take a moment to sign that petition by visiting www.change.org and searching for Sarah Chapman's grave. The point is that's a trade union monument, and it's one that we should really protect. So if you could take the time to do that, I'd be really grateful. Thank you. So can I now return to section 3 of the General Council report, Respect and a Voice at Work, the section on pensions from page 40, and I'm going to call paragraph 313 and motion 31, auto-enrolment and the lowest paid. The General Council support the motion. It will be moved by Aegis and seconded by the CWU. I have an indication that Unite want to speak, and I'd be grateful if they'd come to the front as well. Thank you.
Thank you. President, Congress, Fiona Steele, Aegis Union, raising the motion 31, auto-enrolment and the lowest paid. Congress, pensions inequality is a major concern for the low paid all over the UK. There are many reasons for it, and it's important that this Congress continues to highlight what these reasons are and the impact they have on the workers we represent. Last year at this Congress, my union, Aegis, raised a motion highlighting the discrimination against low-paid workers who didn't meet the threshold of earning £10,000 a year in one job. We argued that we needed to campaign to change this criteria so that more low-paid workers qualify for pension auto-enrolment, so they can benefit from employers' contribution into their pension. Our motion was passed by this Congress, and this issue has been partially addressed by the recent auto-enrolment review, but there's still lots more to be done. This year we want to highlight another flaw in some auto-enrolment schemes that again leave thousands of low-paid workers at a disadvantage. Members of pension schemes who don't pay income tax, i.e. those who earn below the personal tax threshold, are still entitled to basic tax relief on their pension contributions up to £2,880 a year. In practice, this means HMRC will top up their contributions by 20% to £3,600. So for every £8 they contribute to their pot, the government puts in another £2. However, due to an anomaly in the system, this top-up is only available if the pension scheme they are enrolled into claims their tax relief at source. There is no mechanism for those schemes that operate on a net pay basis to reclaim the tax. This means that through no fault of their own, workers who earn less than £11,500 a year cannot claim tax relief on their pension contribution if their employer operates this type of scheme. So auto-enrolling these employees forces them to pay more for their pension, as they're losing out on the 20% top-up that everyone else gets. This issue has been raised several times with the UK government in the past, but their attitude appeared to be they're not losing that much money, so why bother addressing it? This Congress is not acceptable. As we all know, the less money you have, the more you need and depend on. This dismissive attitude from the UK government means that yet again it's the most vulnerable in society who suffer. As auto-enrolment contributions continue to increase and personal tax thresholds rise, the situation will only get worse, with both the number of low-paid workers affected and the size of their losses continuing to rise. One potential solution to this problem is to change the rules that allow net pay schemes to reclaim the tax relief those low-paid workers are entitled to. However, this argument is not being heard. Employees have no control over the pension scheme they're enrolled into, and their employer may not even be aware of the impact of the scheme they're paying into. The government constantly cites tax relief as a major incentive to save for retirement, but Congress, these workers are being misled. They're being encouraged to contribute to a pension while being denied the very incentive that convinces them to do so, usually completely without their knowledge. It's a scandal and it must be addressed. We therefore call on the TUC to add this very important topic to their pensions agenda and to raise awareness of the issue with UK workers, employers and the UK government so this loophole can be closed so that those on lower incomes receive the tax relief they are due. Congress, please support this motion. I move.
Thank you. Seconded by the CWU.
Thank you, Chair Conference. Terry Pullinger from the CWU to second this motion as a consequence really of us amending it. And you will see by our amendment that we've sort of widened the scope a bit, because what struck us, and we congratulate the sponsors for putting it forward, is this identifies there's a much bigger world about the knowledge gap in relation to pensions, which we believe as a trade union movement we should be starting to fill. All of us, I believe, would support the fact that occupational pensions are essential to run alongside the state pension if ordinary working people are going to retire at the right time, have dignity in retirement and have a standard of living security in retirement. They are absolutely essential. And there has been a dramatic shift from DB, defined benefit schemes, to defined contribution schemes in this country. And they're the only two options that are there at the moment. DC shifts the whole risk on pension to the individual. Employers and government, it's no surprise they're not giving publicity to the issue about tax relief because they're turning a blind eye on what's going on with pensions more generally. Yes, auto-enrolment has brought a lot more workers into arguably the occupational pension space. But the truth is, what are those pensions? Are we being honest about what those pensions will produce? Even the TUC report, the retirement lottery, said that over 50% of those employers that people have been auto-enrolled in, they're all DC schemes, are paying less than a 4% contribution into those schemes. We have to be honest. That will not allow decent working people to retire with dignity and retire with security and have a wage in retirement. We need innovation in pension world, and if it has to, then it has to come from us, the trade union movement. The two choices of DB and DC are not enough. DB is the gold standard, no question about that, and if you've got one and you can look after it, that is brilliant. But thousands of workers have been taken out of DB schemes because they've had to close, and most of the ones that still exist are closed to new entrants. Everyone's going into DC. Individual schemes, individual responsibility, individual risk, cash out at the point of retirement, no wage in retirement. Our dispute with Royal Mail, the Four Pillars dispute, we argued that if our DB scheme had to close, we wasn't going to put everyone into a DC scheme. We still wanted a collective scheme because it still rules for us as trade unionists. We get more collectively than you ever get individually. It's in our DNA. These schemes run in other countries. We need legislation to put it in so that we can have our CDC pension scheme. We got the support of the TUC, the support of the special committee that was set up, the pensions committee that's made recommendations, and we believe now pension legislation, hopefully next summer, will allow us to have our scheme. We have to close the knowledge gap. We have to tell people and workers that what you're contributing is not enough. We cannot allow employers and governments to walk on the other side of the street, say, yes, we're providing a pension, but in reality, workers are going to have to work till they drop. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Aegis. Is that who I'm calling? I'm not calling them. I'm calling Unite. I knew what I was doing there. I'm calling Unite. Thank you. My apologies.
President, Congress, my name is Saeed Nahid Uddin from Unite, speaking in support of Motion 31. Congress, I'm a first-time delegate, and this is the first time I've put myself forward to speak. I wanted to speak because of a news story I saw which revealed that only 1 in 10 young workers feel they have any plans in place for retirement. Thanks to zero-hour contracts and precarious work, many young workers are given no certainty whatsoever about the coming days and weeks, let alone years and decades. As this motion makes clear, a tax loophole means that thousands of low-paid workers are being denied the government top-up of 20%. For young workers on low pay, that 20% could make all the difference. This could affect hundreds of thousands of low-paid workers, disproportionately low-paid women workers. So it is right that we should raise awareness and use our collective strength to slam this loophole shut. This is the latest example of how the pension system is rigged against low-paid workers. Another government loophole requires workers to be earning over £10,000 in a single job before benefiting from automatic enrolment. This locks out many workers who have multiple jobs, again disproportionately affecting low-paid women workers. Congress, we need to place this in context. The trend in pensions over the last few years have been towards shutting defined benefit schemes. These schemes gave workers security and certainty. Instead of this hard-earned security, more and more firms are setting up schemes which are tied to the stock market. Often workers have no oversight into where these investments are made, leaving us in the dark about the risks being taken in our name. Our futures must not be gambled with. Pensions are not a luxury. They are not a bonus. They are deferred pay. Let's end the pensions lottery. Let's end the injustice and give certainty and security back to workers. Congress, please join me in supporting this motion.
I haven't heard any speakers against, so I'm assuming that Aegis waived their right to reply. Yep. I'm moving to the vote then on motion 31. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. And all those against, please show. Thank you. That is carried. Moving then to the next section, delegates, we move to section 5 of the General Council report, which is strong unions, the international section from page 70, and I call paragraph 5.7 and composite motion number 14 on Turkey. The General Council supports the composite motion, moved by EIS, seconded by Unite, supported by UCU.
Caroline Yates, the EIS, moving motion composite 14. Since the 2016 Turkish election, the Turkish government has dismissed or detained thousands of workers, including academics and educators, without due process. The plight of the Kurds needs special mention, as the Turkish government seems to be discriminating against the Kurds for electoral reasons. We are very concerned that our Turkish teacher counterparts, arbitrarily dismissed, don't have the same rights, such as freedom, paid employment, freedom of speech and expression, as ourselves. Often, teachers aren't even personally informed of their dismissal. They find out through government websites or lists, which are publicly published. Imagine being notified by decree that you're dismissed. These educators are alleged to be linked to terrorism or the July 2016 coup plot, allegations which are not evidenced or subject to process. Your name is listed,
you lose your job. Thousands have been tried, with many sentenced to life imprisonment for involvement in the coup, and people have been extradited to Turkey. There are wider educational impacts too. The authorities are also targeting students, and 35 university students from Istanbul have been detained since March 2016 after they performed a peaceful protest on campus. So educationalists are self-censoring in Turkey now, and what were once establishments fostering creative, critical thinkers, free speech, and the discussion of controversial issues are now filled with people afraid for their freedom. Turkey's assault on academic freedom negatively affects not only its academic establishments, but also society at large. Those affected face other devastating consequences. They can't work in public sector jobs. They face travel bans, they've been publicly blacklisted. Some have had family members, such as children or partners, who've been fired from their private sector jobs. They can lose healthcare benefits, and their passports are often confiscated. We must stand against these arbitrary actions taken by the Turkish government against their workers and Kurdish people in particular. Due process must be applied to all those who are criminally charged or lose their jobs. We call upon the UK government to actively support the fair treatment of workers and Kurds. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Unite. Whilst Unite are coming up, can I just call NASUWT, NUJ, RMT to make sure that I've got you all here. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Conference. Tom Murphy, speaking for Unite in seconding motion 75. Comrades, the Turkish regime is at war with its own people. Its record of repression against trade unionists, journalists and civil society ranks it alongside the most oppressive regimes on earth. But Conference, the crisis in Turkey cannot be solved until the Kurdish people's struggle for freedom is resolved. That must mean an end to the Turkish state's war on the Kurdish people, inside its claimed borders and outside. Since Congress voted to support the Kurdish struggle for freedom last year by backing the Freedom for Öcalan campaign, the Turkish state has taken war on the Kurds in Syria. The invasion and ethnic cleansing of Afrin, a free canton of Rojava, is a war crime medieval in its barbarity. President Erdogan has increased the arrests of Kurdish peace activists and launched a murderous campaign of targeted assassinations of Kurdish political leaders in the region. Conference, this year the Freedom for Öcalan campaign was the official international campaign of the Durham Miners' Gala. It was an occasion which linked our movement's finest tradition of solidarity, internationalism, with the most important struggle against tyranny of our age. On behalf of Unite, I would like to put on record our thanks to the Durham Miners Association for having the courage, the strength of conviction to give their support to the Öcalan campaign. In the year ahead, the leader of the Kurdish freedom movement, Abdullah Öcalan, will mark his 70th year, but also his 20th year of imprisonment. Öcalan is not only the inspirational leader whose ideas have been tested and put into practice in Rojava, he is a powerful symbol. Until Öcalan walks free, no Kurds walk free. Until the Kurds are free, none of us are free. And that's what it means to be an internationalist. And I am proud that my union is building solidarity with Free Rojava. Conference, we must commit ourselves today to step up the pressure and build the campaign. We must demand that the Turkish government recommit to serious peace talks with the Kurdish freedom movement, represented by the PKK. We must demand a starting point, the immediate release of all political prisoners, including Abdullah Öcalan, the Mandela of the Middle East. Conference, support this motion. Solidarity, long live the free cantons of Rojava.
Thank you. UC.
President, sisters and brothers, Jana de Groot, UCU, supporting Composite 14, and especially drawing attention to the work of our friends and comrades in Academics for Peace in opposing the anti-Kurdish, the anti-worker and anti-people's rights policies of the present government in Turkey. Colleagues, Since 2016, as you've already begun to hear, attacks on Turkish unions, on the justice system, on journalists and on education at every level have reached truly scary levels, ramping up arbitrary authoritarian and repressive state power. 150,000 people losing their jobs, 60,000 people in prison or under arrest, not on proper charges, 21,000 teachers purged from schools and colleges, and often losing a whole range of other employment, welfare, and freedom to move rights, as we heard from the colleague from EIS. This is a really massive attack on the basic rights of people in Turkey, on civil society organisations, including unions. But one of these civil society organisations, who we've drawn attention to in the motion, is Academics for Peace, a group organised to campaign for political solutions to the Turkish question, alternatives to armed conflict and state violence. And it's really ironic that the Turkish government labels Academics for Peace terrorists. Many of their members have been dismissed, sometimes with the collusion of university authorities. My own union worries that many universities in Turkey are no longer fit for purpose as places of free inquiry, free teaching, and free debate. Some of them have had to leave Turkey, some of them have been arrested. Let me take the case of our colleague Hanafi Baris, charged with terrorism and put into solitary confinement for reposting, without comment, material on these issues, including articles from The Guardian. His trial comes up next week, and I hope we can send him a big cheer of solidarity. Can I hear you, Congress? Thank you. Colleagues, Academics for Peace, like other progressive groups in Turkey, is doing vital work in bringing issues of Kurdish rights, human rights, to the international community. I've been honoured to work with them and bring their work to the attention of this movement. Let's maintain that proud tradition of international solidarity and support the composite.
Thank you. NASUWT to be followed by NUJ.
President, Congress, Fred Bryan, NASUWT, the Teachers Union, speaking in support of Composite 14 on Turkey. Congress, today in Turkey, teachers, trade unionists and human rights campaigners continue to face extreme repression, intimidation and arbitrary arrest. Attacks on workers' rights, as enshrined in the International Labour Organization, have increased considerably since 2008. Thousands of teachers are denied the right to future work, and unions continue to face unjustified surveillance, intimidation and attacks from security services. In Turkey today, children and young people are denied the right to free, quality public education. We have witnessed the deliberate closure of thousands of education institutions, and many teachers are forced out of work and denied the right to work. And in recent weeks, Turkey's economy and currency have experienced meltdown. Congress, we cannot ignore the destructive impact of the dictatorial approach taken by President Erdogan in running the country. And although President Erdogan lifted the state of emergency on the 18th of July 2018, Turkish security forces continue to systematically oppress and attack Turkish minorities, including Turkish Kurds, in the southeast of the country. The NASUWT is proud to work in solidarity with our teacher and trade union sisters and brothers in Egetin Sem and the Public Sector Confederation KESK. But we are deeply concerned that because of these attacks, many trade union leaders have been forced to flee Turkey and seek asylum elsewhere. The NASUWT is shocked by these unjustified attacks against teachers, against the right to education and against the universal right to freedom of association and to be a member of a trade union. We must redouble our efforts through solidarity support for our colleagues in Turkey, and we must take urgent action to press the UK government to demand that Turkey ceases its repressive actions against teachers and guarantees quality education for all children and young people. Congress, please support the motion.
Thank you very much. NUJ.
Stephen Bird, National Union of Journalists. I'm a first-time delegate and a first-time speaker. I'm hoping that helps you excuse the croakiness. President Congress, just 3 hours flight from the UK by plane, 160 journalists are rotting in jail. That quite distressing and perhaps even shocking statistic means that Turkey is the single biggest jailer of journalists in the world. Just from this year's headlines, in February of this year, 3 journalists were jailed for given life sentences alleging involvement in the coup of 2 years ago. These have been disputed by them and by the International Federation of Journalists as completely baseless. In July of this year, six journalists were given heavy sentences on the basis of articles they'd written, which prosecutors said showed that they were members of or supporters of anti-government terrorist organisations. This abuse, this repressive regime, and the increase in repression in Turkey is obviously distressing at an individual level, but it's also about freedom of speech. It's about an attack on the media, and it's intended and is succeeding, unfortunately, in silencing dissent and opposition. That's the point of it. That's why we're strong supporters of this motion. What's happening in Turkey is wrong for employees throughout the country. What's happening to freedom of speech is also wrong simply at a human level. And I would also like to draw your attention to last year's TUC resolution, which voted to send a delegation to Turkey. This is going to happen in the next, I believe, in the near future. We would welcome this. Unfortunately, it is not only still relevant, it's even more relevant than it was when this was first proposed last year. I strongly support this motion, and let's put an end to this repression once for all. Thank you.
Thank you. RMT, I understand you want to raise a question or a comment on paragraph 5.7. Is that right? Please.
President, Congress, greetings, comrade. I wish I had risen to speak on the motion that we are debating, because it is something that our delegation support, and we do that. The question that I wish to raise, Chair, is on 5.7, global solidarity in the Global Union Organization, and the absence of anything around Haiti, because our union have been asking repeatedly on a number of Congress as to the treatment and the utilization of funds raised by the international community, where we still see people in Haiti living in squalor. So very consciously, my union wants to know that this is not being dropped off the agenda, and wonder if a statement could be made as to the current situation as regard Haiti. Thank you, comrades.
You'll understand that that's not going to happen now. The General Council report is a report on the activity that's been undertaken by the TUC. But if I can assure the comrade and the RMT that I'll ask the office to contact you to discuss further your concerns over Haiti and see what we can get done about what you're asking. Thank you. Congress, unfortunately, surprise, surprise, we're running a little behind time. So I want to let you know it will not now be possible to take all the scheduled business this evening, by which I mean motion 77, food security and sustainability in the name of the BDA. I'll inform you tomorrow morning when I hope to be able to reschedule this business. Thank you. Can I also, before moving on to the formal vote, ask you to welcome Luis Pedraza, President of the CUT Colombia, to the stage. He's going to be speaking with us in a minute. Luis, you're extremely welcome. I just wanted to say hello. Can I, though, ask whether EIS need to have the right to reply? No, thank you. Can I then move us to the vote on composite motion number 14? All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against, please show. Thank you. I call paragraphs 110, 310 and motion 76, the International Labour Organisation. The General Council supports the motion, moved by Accord, seconded by the NASUWT. I've got an indication from Unison that they also wish to speak, if they can make sure they're at the front. Thank you. Accord.
Good evening, Congress. President Sheba Hamid from Accord moving motion 76 on the International Labour Organisation. It's also my first time at Congress. Thank you. Brothers and sisters, as we reflect on our 150th Congress, it's right that we look back on our past achievements as well as preparing for a strong future together. In 1919, representatives of British trade unions played a key role in the creation of the International Labour Organisation. The ILO will be celebrating its centenary year next year, and it needs our support in ensuring it too enjoys a strong future and continues its crucial role in defending workers' rights. The ILO is the only part of the United Nations system that puts workers and employers alongside their governments alongside member governments in taking the decisions that affect all of our lives. Through the ILO, unions have won the recognition that fundamental workers' rights are also human rights. ILO conventions, such as those that guarantee our freedom to join unions or to protect us from forced labour and dangerous work, underpin the UN Declaration of Human Rights. At 99 years old, the ILO continues to look forward, and we need its voice, amplifying our own more than ever. For example, its Commission on the Future of Work, which has trade union representation, is due to report next year and will be a welcome antithesis to the World Bank's own report on the future of work, which, surprise, surprise, will say that the deregulation of workers' rights and low-cost labour is that future. But we also need the ILO to be free to deal with the issues that will threaten a more inclusive future. Within the ILO, employers have used their voice in recent years to question whether the conventions cover the right to strike, and they have tried to undermine the ILO's ability to protect those workers putting their lives on the line to defend human rights in countries with a brutal disregard for them. We must challenge the employers of the world to do their duty at the ILO and fully support its aims of social justice and decent work. The ILO is looking at how we can protect workers in global supply chains, bridging the governance gaps that too often leave people unsure of where to turn when they're exploited and abused, so that companies can be held to account no matter how complex and far-flung their supply chains are. It's looking too at violence in the workplace, with workers striving to ensure protections are in place that will help stop gender-based violence for all women. Employers and governments, including our own, have an opportunity to do the right thing and get firmly behind these initiatives. Congress. The ILO was founded on the principle that social justice is essential for lasting peace. We can see around us the ways in which a failure of social justice is feeding a revival of extremism, with the far right seeking to prey on the insecurities of people who feel left behind by modern capitalism. The ILO was founded in the ruins of war. We must work with it to fight the threat of another. Congress, please support motion 76. I move.
Thank you very much. NASUWT.
President, Congress, Patrick Roach, NASUWT, the Teachers Union, proud to be supporting and seconding motion 76 on the International Labour Organisation. Congress, we need no reminder of the threats to the rights of workers around the world, as well as here in the UK. In Congress, in the context of Brexit, we know that these rights are under attack from right-wing ideologues. Earlier this year, we saw the appalling evidence published in the ITUC's 2018 Global Rights Index. It demonstrated how governments around the world are increasingly engaged in overt and covert attacks on workers' rights, freedom of speech, and freedom of association. Globally, we're witnessing attacks on these rights on an industrial scale, rolling back civil rights and stifling democracy. And at home and abroad, we've seen increased attacks on the rights of public sector workers, the dilution and the removal of the rights of migrant workers, rampant discrimination, intimidation and harassment at work, systematic attacks on trade union rights, and the assault on the right to strike. Congress, be in no doubt, attacks on workers' rights are attacks on civil rights and on our democracy. In 2018, the ITUC once again listed the UK as a regular violator of workers' rights. Congress, our movement's priority must be to defend these rights. That's why the TUC was born 150 years ago. It must remain our absolute and unshakable priority. As a movement, nationally and internationally, we must use our education and training programmes to inform and to educate our members and future generations about the fundamental importance of trade unions and workers' rights. At home and abroad, we need the TUC, together with the ILO and international partners, to continue to show courage, determination and leadership that we need to defend workers' rights at home and abroad, to challenge those governments guilty of the most serious violations of workers' rights, to expose our own government's hypocrisy and its empty rhetoric behind its promise of a country that works for everyone, and we need to hold the UK government to account against ILO standards. No rolling back of our rights at work, no race to the bottom, and no excuses. Congress, please support this motion.
Thank you, NES Unison.
President, Congress. Jackie Lewis Unison speaking in support of the motion and amendment. Congress, as the motion rightly states, the ILO Core Convention set a global benchmark for workers' rights. As early as 1927, the ILO explicitly recognised that the right to strike existed, linked directly to freedom of association, a recognition not challenged by employers for more than 60 years. The ILO's tripartite structure ensures that governments, employers and trade unions are represented in its decision-making. But it also means that one of the parties can bring the work of the ILO to a halt if they refuse to play by the rules. And since 2012, we've seen a more hostile attitude by the employers at the ILO. Because in 2012, the employers challenged established ILO policy on the right to strike, bringing the Committee on the Application of Standards to a standstill, and preventing the International Labour Conference from investigating serious abuses of workers' rights. That attack lasted for 3 years, seriously undermining the work of the ILO, and especially the Committee on the Application of Standards. It was only resolved when the ITUC presented a compromise, recognising the right of employers to lockout. That was not agreed by the global union federations. It undermined long-standing industrial relations practices in many countries. And despite that concession, the employers have continued to block the Committee on the Application of Standards. Nevertheless, the ILO can play a positive role. Unison welcomes the good progress made towards the adoption of a convention on violence in the world of work. And Unison is part of a global campaign to get the ILO to recognise child marriage as a form of child labour. There are millions of children, mainly girls, forced into marriage and become part of a hidden workforce because they are excluded from the ILO statistics on forced labour, allowing governments around the world to avoid their responsibilities to end child labour. Due to the campaign, the ILO Director General has acknowledged the problem, but the ILO needs to go further. And threats to the ILO from employers and governments alike need to be resisted. 100 years on from its foundation, the ILO still has a vital role to play, and perhaps particularly in defending vulnerable workers such as these children. Congress, please support the motion.
Thank you, Unison. Accord, I've heard no speeches against. Do you want your right to reply? Okay, thank you very much. I move us to the vote. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? Thank you. Congress, it's now my very great pleasure to introduce our international speaker, Luis Pedraza, the president of TUC Colombia. As I said to you, I visited Colombia last month and saw the growing fear of our brothers and sisters about the implementation of the peace agreement, which British and Irish trade unionists supported through the excellent work of JFC, and it gave us all high hopes for the future. But now I have to say that agreement's stumbling, with one trade unionist or human rights activist murdered almost every day. A senior peace negotiator, Jesus Santrich, has been arrested, and the new president of Colombia openly opposes the peace agreement. For Colombian trade unionists, the future is very frightening. Luis, you are very welcome, and I invite you to address Congress.
Honorable Congreso, señora Presidenta, la Central Unitaria de Trabajadores de Colombia se complace saludar este memorable Congreso de la Central Sindical Británica TUC y les agradece la invitación, además de la tremenda solidaridad que los trabajadores y las trabajadoras británicas han ofrecido a Colombia durante años a través de la organización Justicia por Colombia. La solidaridad internacional ha sido una herramienta de resistencia importante contra el neoliberalismo y la violencia política que afecta a millones de colombianos y colombianas quienes sufren las consecuencias del conflicto y de seguridad. La sociedad civil colombiana se enfrenta con muchos retos para conseguir una paz estable y duradera y con justicia social. Lamentablemente, el genocidio contra los líderes y lideresas sociales sigue incesantemente. Más de 400 defensores y defensoras de derechos humanos han sido asesinados y asesinadas desde el comienzo del 2016, mientras la impunidad sigue protegiendo muchos de los culpables. Todos los días son asesinados nuevos compañeros y la CUT ya registra la dolorosa cifra de 3.127 sindicalistas asesinados en los últimos 20 años. Hace poco, Colombia eligió a Iván Duque como su nuevo presidente. Como miembro del partido de la derecha, el Centro Democrático, la candidatura de Duque fue promovida por su mentor Álvaro Uribe, quien enfrenta serias dificultades ante las Cortes de Justicia en Colombia sobre temas ligados a la violencia y a los derechos humanos durante su ejercicio como gobernador del departamento de Antioquia y como presidente de Colombia. La Central Unitaria no espera un cambio en favor de los asuntos sociales a los trabajadores colombianos. Según su Ministerio de Hacienda, los planes económicos del gobierno de Duque se enfocan en mantener o aumentar el compromiso con el Banco Mundial, el Fondo Monetario Internacional y la Organización de Cooperación para el Desarrollo Económico. Desde una perspectiva ortodoxa económica, este prioriza el interés por el gran capital, las empresas multinacionales y los monopolios industriales y financieros de Colombia, propuesto en reformas tributarias que exoneran estos sectores e imponen nuevos impuestos a la clase media y pobre del país. Por lo anterior, Colombia se encuentra en el segundo lugar de mayor inequidad social en América Latina, siendo a la vez el país de mayor migración interna de los sectores rurales y campesinos hacia los centros urbanos por razones de violencia y abandono del Estado. Apoyamos sin condición alguna el proceso y los acuerdos de paz que se firmaron entre el Estado colombiano y las Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia, FARC, como también los diálogos con el Ejército de Liberación Nacional, en perspectiva de un acuerdo. Lamentamos que el gobierno de Santos no actuó de forma diligente para la implementación plena de los acuerdos con las FARC, que debería darse a través de leyes de la República, y por eso mismo hoy se tienen serias dificultades para el incumplimiento de esos acuerdos, por lo cual llamamos a la comunidad internacional y en especial a la sindical que exija al gobierno del presidente Duque cumplir con los acuerdos de Estado que adoptó, los acuerdos y de apertura a los nuevos diálogos, como ocurre actualmente con el Ejército de Liberación Nacional, los cuales se encuentran inciertos por falta de voluntad política del gobierno. Ante las circunstancias, por las dificultades que informo al presidente del Congreso, la CUT persistirá en la convergencia social con todas las demás organizaciones sociales para mantener activa la movilización, las protestas y las huelgas, y a la vez la exigencia a que se atienda y solucione una agenda nacional que incluye los temas señalados en este Congreso. Finalmente, nuestro reconocimiento y gratitud por el incansable apoyo institucional que hemos recibido constantemente desde esta Casa Mayor, el sindicalismo y de los trabajadores y trabajadoras británicos. Y a Justicia por Colombia por su compromiso con el sindicalismo, los derechos humanos y la paz con justicia social en Colombia. Asimismo, nuestra sentida felicitación por el 150 aniversario de existencia y de trabajo de la TUC. Muchas gracias, compañeras y compañeros.
Luis, I was expecting to have you back on the platform to say thank you, but thank you nevertheless down there. I think it's important that we recommit, all of us, to the support that we will give to our friends in the CUT and the trade union movement in Colombia. As we know, and as I said earlier, what we do will save lives. And solidarity to you and all those that you represent. Thank you. So, Congress, that completes our business for this afternoon. Can I remind you that there are various meetings taking place this evening? Details are displayed on the screens behind me and can also be found on page 11 of the Congress Guide or in the leaflet included in your Congress wallet. Delegates, can I just mention as well the A Statue for Sylvia campaign. There is a campaign supported by the TUC to give Sylvia Pankhurst the commemoration she deserves by erecting a statue in Clerkenwell Green in London. The site's been approved, the cost for the statue has been completed. All that remains is that rather sticky issue of funds in order to get the statue cast, which is a very, very indelicate, unsubtle hint to say, can you have a look at the campaign website? Details are on page 7 of the Congress Guide. Congress, thank you for helping me through this first part. I will improve, I promise you, but in true bouncer fashion, I'm going to ask you to clear the building, taking all your belongings with you. Congress is adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning. Have a lovely evening and thank you.